Hey everybody!
Hello.
Welcome back!
Yes.
How are you doing out there today?
Oh, wouldn't it be so great if we could know?
Yeah, I really want to know.
Oh, so
We both
good.
do. We love getting to know people and
No.
asking good questions. And we're thankful you're spending some time with us. So thank you so much for just being you and being present with us today. We are here diving into our 14th episode.
I know.
So exciting. And we are going to be unpacking what it is to be in overdrive. So being in overdrive.
So there's a lot to unpack there.
It's a big topic.
It's a big topic. And I think it's important to say, like, we talk about lots of things.
Yes.
Of course, we say lots of words to each other and listen to lots of words. But I think once we're talking and like something hits a nerve with us, and we can kind of pull in stories from other people, and we're like, oh yeah, this and that and this kind of ties to a topic, we can kind of see it rise to the top of all the things.
And it feels important. Like we want to bring it to you. We want to provide enrichment and content and dialogue around the topic.
Yes, and we can apply those things that we've become experts in to this topic in a way that I think is a little bit unique to the conversation that people are having right now. Sure. I think a lot of people are talking about the circumstances that lead us to experiencing overdrive. A lot of conversation around how hard things are, and rightfully so.
Yeah, where it's fall of 2020. So it's just been a really crazy year, and everyone's got different language for how they describe the year.
Yeah,
I just use the word crazy. Seems to fit it well, but everybody has their own story, and we've unpacked all that before. So I think we should just define what we mean by overdrive here.
Yeah. So when we were talking about it, a way we were talking about it was to say, like, it's maybe something that you naturally do, but you're doing it over and above. I like that. So I don't know if we can talk about it without talking about an example, but you and I had the opportunity to attend strength scope training a couple years ago.
Yes.
And
now they refer to themselves as Helios.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. So it's a different way of looking at or assessing your strengths, and it's what gives you energy. I love that.
I do too. I loved it so much. There's a lot of assessments that I like and enjoy, but this one really resonated with me because it wasn't just like what we were good at. It was like what fuels you and energizes you. And I really do like that language and relate to it.
Yeah, there's a definite distinction there. I remember taking the assessment, and some of the things that I didn't score as high on, or maybe didn't show up as my strengths, were surprising to me.
Me too.
Yeah,
for sure.
I remember like resilience. I didn't score really high in resilience, and I'm thinking, dude, you do not know my story. This is offensive. But actually then understanding, getting my head around, I could be really good at resilience, which I think I am, and still own the fact that it doesn't bring me energy to have to be resilient.
That has been, I would say, similar for me in the assessment. And we have our assessment was really very close, very close. Similar. Yeah, we have a lot in common. So I felt the same way, but having that language has been so huge, especially this year.
Yeah. And so I know, like, if I'm being really resilient, I might also start to feel fatigued.
So you're good at it.
Absolutely.
And you can do it, but it's not, so like it doesn't give you more energy to do more things.
Yeah. And as my energy starts to get depleted, I might flip into overdrive in those things that I do get energy from, because I'm kind of like trying to be a sponge and get energy. So I'm going to do the things that bring me energy, but I might do them too much, because too much of a good thing can be not a good thing.
Yeah.
So that's overdrive.
But I do remember a colleague in the course we took, it was over 2 days. I remember wanting to understand her assessment on resilience. And like, as we were kind of getting to know each other, excuse me, and she did get energy from being resilient.
Yeah.
And that made total sense. Like her career and like how she was and what she chose to do. It was just so cool to have that definition. For me, I was super surprised creativity is on there. And it wasn't one of my main like top 10. And I was like, hold on a second, I'm an artist. But when it's also definitions and understanding the assessment, because their definition of creativity is different than how I use creativity.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing that is slightly different about the two of our assessments is that I have a strength in strategic planning. I think it's called strategic planning. It's something like that. What is it?
So yeah, we have to look at our little like wheel.
Let's see.
And
yeah, strategic mindfulness. I knew I was saying that wrong. So I have a strength there, and Jaime is a little higher, has more strength with optimism than I have.
And I think the other difference I had was initiative.
Yes.
So that was a little different than yours.
Yes. So otherwise, like if you look at these little models, these wheels, ours look very, very similar.
There's like only those two things that were different. But then along with the assessment, you do learn where you will go into overdrive.
Yes. So this leads us to this conversation today. And we decided that in order to talk about this and make it relatable, we might tell you a little story. So last school year, prior to things getting even crazier, things were crazy for us for a little bit of time. And we have a tendency, because you can imagine with professional development schedules the way they are, part of the way our business works is that we get really crazy at different times throughout the year. One of those times being that week before school starts or two, while educators are going back, but students aren't back in the class yet.
Correct.
So what happens is we stack a lot of really important things into a small amount of space.
We do.
Which could, you can all imagine, lead to a need for overdrive or a tendency to be in overdrive. And so on one bright, beautiful day after meeting with some amazing educators and having more to go to next, we were leaving and Jaime was driving.
I was. Driving. But, okay, well, even the whole driving, we have a different style of driving too.
Well, that's true.
That is. But I don't think I knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah. So
I'll let you tell the story.
Well, no, you didn't know though.
I didn't. I had no idea where.
But here's the sweet thing. And so here's the thing. Her optimism says it's okay. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. We're going to get there on time. It doesn't matter. And it's all going to work out. Jaime in overdrive flips to optimism.
I go up here. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Your voice sounds a little different.
My voice gets a little high and everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, and it is, and the optimism is, we're going to talk about this in just a second, but it's really, really important to maintain. Like, I want to protect Jaime's optimism. But in overdrive, it doesn't always serve you as well as it would if you weren't in overdrive, right?
Correct.
Same with strategic mindfulness. So I want to know the fastest route, and I want to have it all the things figured out. I want to have thought through it. I want to know we're doing the right thing. So on this particular day, we were leaving school, and we were sitting at a stoplight in the right lane, not the correct lane, the right lane. And we needed to be in the left lane. And my voice just ever so slightly said, do you know where you're going? We have to imagine, like we were just joking before we started recording this, that we can post all the outtakes and you guys would really probably enjoy just watching us be
so much fun together, and we've never had conflicts, and we meshed like, I don't know, we're like soul sisters. Like we work. And so this was like our first time, but it was off, coming off of this training.
Yeah, we had the tools, but just applying them. I hope that this seems like we're not just like taking a course on memory lane, but actually giving a structure for what happened here. When we were in overdrive, and Jaime was in overdrive in her way, and I was in overdrive in my way, we had a really hard time connecting for a couple of different reasons. One, I think because overdrive is not authentic. It's over normal. Right. And so it doesn't quite feel right. And two, because when we're in overdrive, we're not as efficient. We think we are. We're kind of tricking our brains, but we're actually not able to breathe and to really, I think, take in all the stimuli. So I'm not able to really take in and notice you and see, what do you need right here? How are you feeling? Because I'm in my own head a little bit too much.
Yeah, we both were. I mean, because it was just, it was a stressful time, just like I'm sure you all encounter and have. And that's like kind of that comes in peaks. And I think I remember the most about that. Yes, the directions were one thing. That was like the topic in front of us was getting to the right location, but we were also already in a mindset of another training that was going to be really big for us in front of a lot of people. And I remember just like talking to you about that. But because there wasn't a connection, it just wasn't productive.
It made things harder.
It did. Yeah. And we didn't even know in the moment. So then you have to process that.
And we talked about this in another, and we could unpack it in a future one, but then what's normal and human, I think at that point, is to make up a story.
Right.
You're trying to answer a question, what is wrong with this other person? And the answer is nothing.
Well, you're like, why can't we get to where we're going?
Right. Why are our priorities in order? Why aren't we, all the things.
But we made it.
And here's the thing, I imagine we're going to go back and even listen to this, and we have a hard time telling this story like we were super mad at each other, because we weren't.
You weren't at all.
I think it's actually a great example, though, because it's not a major problem. It's not a major trauma. It's just a really good example of how things get off course, and then things are just challenging. And if we can check in and be self-aware, we can bring it back on course.
You bet. And I do think, but if you don't have that self-awareness, that all those little moments of being in overdrive add up to then what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
They are big deals, and they can create trauma. And so it's like, that's why we wanted to unpack it today.
Absolutely.
So it was like a small example, but we did make it there.
We did.
And we did have good dialogue to say, hey, I think I was in overdrive here, and this is how I'm feeling. So we have all the feels and the communication.
And so I think what's amazing about relationship building, and I think whether it's a teacher and a student, or in our families, or you and I getting to work together, whoever you're in a relationship with over time, if you can be self-aware and then also aware of that other person.
Right.
If you see me kind of spinning in that we have to figure this out and overthinking things, you know that I'm stressed. Now, you could get irritated with me for that. You would have every right to, but you could also say, hey, I'm kind of picking up on the fact that you're stressed here.
So what can we do? So we can break it down.
Yeah.
So you see the disconnect there. So Amy's wanting to like really strategize and have an exact plan. And I'm just like, I'm up in the clouds. I'm not able to get my brain in a productive space to be able to strategize.
But here's the really confusing part about that. I would say I don't live in that linear space most of the time. I love to go round and round and round and see all the things and live in the gray and be. It's only when I'm super stressed that I then
shifts into a new gear.
It's in overdrive. I would say you're optimistic. Almost always. It's very rarely that you're up in the clouds and unable to be strategic.
I can't rationalize, because and I agree with you, because I'm organized. I like a good plan. I like to have information to feel safe. So it is interesting that in those overdrive spaces, again, that's why it's like, okay, so this does give me a lot of energy. So having that self-awareness of how much of that is too far.
And there's nobody else who's going to know that but you about you. So, I mean, I think that's where we get into, we're going to kind of try to talk about a little bit about the self-awareness piece. Why do we get into overdrive is one thing. We can talk about that. But then how do we deal with it when we are? So that's kind of the agenda for the next few minutes. Before we go into how do we get self-aware, what are some tools there? Why do we get into overdrive?
I think for me, it's typically overwhelm. I'm sure probably fatigue, like the reality of my schedule probably contributes to that. Outside stimuli. Those are just a few off the top of my head. What do you think?
I would agree with all of that.
Yeah.
I think we, for another training that we were doing, we were talking about trauma, and I was talking about how I kind of grappled with understanding trauma in my own life, and I don't know that I've had trauma, and kind of looking at it as big T's and little t traumas, and all of a sudden coming to an understanding where I realized that trauma was anything outside of my normal capacity to handle.
Can you say that again?
Trauma is anything outside of my normal capacity to handle it. So if that's an understanding, if somebody gives me something that is not in that normal, I get this.
Okay, so welcome to 2020.
Right? It's a little traumatic. I mean, I laugh, but it's not like a laugh because it's
I
funny.
know. I'm in overdrive though.
No, it's 100%, and so many unknowns. I mean, in my house where Carl is famously known for saying, "Move as many unknowns to the known category." Like the unknown is hard, and so when I think about being in overdrive, it makes perfect sense that we would be in overdrive as people right now because there's so much unknown and so much outside of our normal.
Yeah.
But also it makes sense because we know better than to act too bratty.
It's true.
Well, sometimes we do. Sometimes we just lose it and we are.
Good choices.
Right. But we know, like we would tell our kids, you need to get a handle on this. You need to, and we know it's expected. So we try to fake it and be okay. And then sometimes I think for me, that's where overdrive shows up. If I know my schedule's too maxed out or I have too much on my plate or I'm too whatever, and I keep ignoring it for a while, that's where overdrive will kick in for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, you could use this assessment or you could just really think about you and your qualities that you're proud of and then what those look like. What attributes do you express when you are stressed? And I think that's just a way you can kind of learn what those are. And this is really helpful. I have not taken the assessment or had my children take the assessment or my husband, but this language, this awareness, this overdrive conversation has really helped with the people that I love the most. And also even a colleague or somebody that I work with or just know enough. I can just kind of get an intuition or a sense.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's cool. Once you kind of have that self-awareness for you, it does help you create those outside connections with the people in your life.
Absolutely. So
I'm having grace for when they're in overdrive.
I had a thought and we didn't talk about it before. So
go girl.
I know. Well, it kind of throws you under the bus just a little bit. I know. Who would do that? Hey, I just crossed my mind though, because we have a few notes in front of us just to kind of keep us on track, because you can imagine we would go all over the place with our conversation. And I'm reading these words, toxic positivity, and I'm thinking about optimism and overdrive. Is that the same thing maybe?
Possibly. That's maybe why I go like this when I see it. It makes this face.
So toxic
unique face.
So toxic positivity being that we're just trying to like throw positivity at things and we're just asking people to just be positive when things are hard. Obviously, based on the name of our channel, our shows, we're calling it real life positivity.
Yeah.
But if you just did the positivity, if you just did the optimism, maybe that's when it gets toxic.
I would say it's dangerous for sure. And I think someone who is so positive, and you are too, like we live in that positive space because it's a choice. It's what we choose. Yeah. But I love it. Really the name of all these episodes it's perfect.
Yeah.
We try to be real, not try, we do.
Yeah.
We are real and we acknowledge the overwhelm, the fatigue, the stimuli, and then you work through it in a really healthy way.
Yeah.
And that's why we're talking about this.
Absolutely.
Because if we just can recognize when we are in that overdrive space, so if I'm just in la la land and I'm not acknowledging, actually have to get in a safer space to get us where we need to be, so that we arrive on time and that all the things, I have to get to that reality.
Yeah. But it could be just as toxic for me to sit in strategic mindfulness and never let us breathe and have fun and enjoy and be present because I'm so in planning mode and trying to figure it all out. That would be just as toxic. So in environments where people are saying there's toxic positivity, there's also toxic negativity. There's also, I think anytime we go in overdrive and exclude the whole and seeing people, it gets unhealthy.
Absolutely. And so I don't know if you guys have read any articles or heard about that, but there is kind of some trends happening in education specifically about toxic positivity. And so we've been researching it a bit. And so thanks for letting us hash that out today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the idea is anything extreme, anything one way, you're just not seeing it in a whole picture.
Yeah. So in that moment where we're in the car and we're in the right lane and we need to be in the left lane, my tendency there, because I'm human, is to want to fix the problem. to want to make us get right. But what happens if I, in that moment, ask you what you need? Or if I notice you, if I see you and I hear you and you know you matter, all of a sudden the problem's going to get solved.
And it would probably kind of pull me out of overdrive as well, and create that connection.
Yeah, but I have to. That's like some superpower stuff, because my human nature wants to do what I know.
Sure.
But man, as soon as I notice the other person, I have faith in the fact that, hey, this is all good here. We need to work together. It changes things.
Would you, in that moment, kind of a mindful moment there, being superhuman, be able to even notice yourself and like what you need, and then take some time to notice another person?
Yeah. So what would that sound like? Like, hey, Jaime, I know that we've got a lot going on here, and it's easy to not be worried about the details. I am a little worried about the details because we have a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I think we need to be in the left-hand lane. How does that not sound like condescending? How do I not sound like a jerk there?
Well, because for me specifically, I'm an optimism land. So I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. Okay, thank you.
Let me do I say like, hey, there's a rainbow on the left lane. Let's go to that. Like, I don't know. Like, how do I?
No, I think it's.
What does it sound like? Is it just honest dialogue?
I think it's honesty. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's when we can be vulnerable in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And I say a healthy way there because sometimes we're so vulnerable, where it's maybe not the appropriate time to like let it all out and share a life story, but it's just enough.
It's enough to say, this is what we need.
Be honest. Yeah, I think
how are you doing?
Here's how I'm feeling. And I think that notice could be even an internal, like it could be like a self-talk thing, like, hey, me, I'm okay. Yeah. I'm safe here. I just need to get this figured out. And,
because there's something about too, because what we do is always toward that end game of confidence and resilience. There's something about being confident enough to have that conversation. So we're not just reflecting on this conversation a year later or more. We have had this conversation many times. And actually, once we were not needing to be in overdrive, and we unpacked it, it was like, wow, it was so cool.
It was actually kind of nice, again, to have that language to say, oh, I was in overdrive there.
Yeah.
Thank you for being patient with me while I work through that. And then you're like, I was in overdrive too. I mean, we came together quite beautifully.
And so I think in that confidence, you can set some boundaries. So you know me at this point, and I know you at this point, to know that if we have a lot scheduled, we need a pretty solid plan going into it.
Yes.
I have a huge respect for the fact that you make sure, and it's because the way you live, you ground me, if you will, in fun and making sure it stays light and doesn't get like so heavy and so detail oriented. And so I have so much respect for that. And what's crazy is I think in this relationship, it's such a good example of it, but it applies, like I said earlier, to so many things. I want to protect that in you. I don't want your optimism to get into overdrive, because when it's in a healthy place, it is so much fun and it's so good. Yay. And I need it. So I want to make sure and not put you in those situations where you're having to fight for it and feeling in overdrive.
Sure. Well, and I would say I could reciprocate that with you, and I appreciate that strategic mindset, and that's so necessary and important, and it's an energizer for you, and I celebrate it and I love it, and we need it in this partnership as well.
Yeah.
So I think we both have learned that about each other. So I mean, we're not necessarily saying go out and get this assessment. You should if you are really drawn to it, because it is very helpful. But again, I think it's just having self-awareness. How are you when you are not feeling any stress? Like, what gives you energy? What qualities? And then what does that look like when you are in kind of a harder situation?
Yeah.
And then knowing that.
So I think noticing in its early days was about compliments, giving heartfelt compliments. And that's an easy way to understand it, an easy way to explain it. I am coming to a place where I'm understanding, I have been for a while, that noticing is I see you, I hear you, you matter to me. And we're not always just noticing compliments or good things.
Yeah.
And we're not always just noticing other people. We need to be able to receive that. And I think one thing that maybe applies here in terms of how do I tap into that self-awareness is being able to notice and compliment yourself and others and receive it, but also being able to notice the criticisms and receive it. It's really seeing the whole person. Yeah. When things are good, when things are hard. When I can look in the mirror and say, gosh, there's a lot of strength here and there's a lot of room for me to grow, all of a sudden I have a chance to know myself and see it play out in lots of places. But if that's too overwhelming and I can't even look at myself in the mirror, this is a good indicator that maybe the priority needs to be checking in with myself and asking myself what I need.
I love that.
That would definitely be
use that strategy a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So the world has warranted overdrive right now.
Yep.
But what we do with it is up to us.
We have a choice.
Who are we going to be?
But I think before you can choose is having an awareness.
Yeah.
Just taking a little time for self-exploration. Please remember that you're going to spend more time with yourself than you will anybody else in your whole life, right? That internal dialogue is active always. And so just using that time for you is essential right now. Yeah. More than ever. It's always essential, but it just feels more prominent and necessary.
Feels good. I think it's really important when we can have conversations about culture and talking about the greater good. And then I think there's so much of what we do that breaks it down into the individual, into how am I doing? How are you doing? How are we doing individually? Because we're each showing up, being the rock and a ripple, and then
so
together
that impacts your whole community and culture for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess our call to action today is to be intentional with getting to know yourself. That self-awareness, understanding what that looks like for you in overdrive. Please be graceful with yourself in that. This isn't to be like critical of you. And I think a call to action there is actually have some communication around it with I call it my nest, the people closest to me and what that's like. And just once I have that self-awareness, having the communication skills to help other people understand me, I think is helpful. And then of course, always notice the goodness in yourself and others.
So good. Yeah. Always so easy.
That's it.
Thanks for having this conversation with me today.
Absolutely. I loved it. It's been so good. We hope it's been helpful for you. We appreciate you so much. Gosh, we're on Twitter, YouTube, the podcast going.
It's all good.
We're in all the places.
We'd love to hear from you. If this made you think of anything in particular, have any thoughts or questions or ideas for us, shoot them to us.
Always
we
give
love
us
that.
Feedback. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you are well.
Bye.
Bye.